All right, so the graphic assignment we had, here it is. Wanted to show you guys a couple things. First of all, we want to make a title for our graph. And when in doubt, you can just take the two variables that you have, in this case, meal cost and tip, and we can just make the title be that. Meal cost versus tip. Or I could say something like tips, figuring out tips. Something that talks about what is this graph? What is it showing? All right, next order of business is that we got to label the axes, which means we got to put the proper variable on the proper axis. And we need to label it correctly. So here's how we do that. You need to know that the responding variable, also known as the dependent variable, goes on the y-axis, okay? So you can probably, in a lot of cases, just talk about the two variables. This depends on that, or that depends on this, and it makes sense, and you can figure out which one goes on the y. Like in this case, what makes more sense? Meal cost depends on the tip, or the tip depends on the meal cost? The meal cost depends on the tip, or the tip depends on the meal cost? Tip depends on the meal cost, so the tip is the dependent variable. Now, it's not just about labeling the axis. We also want to make sure that we include units, and what we do is put those in parentheses next to the title of the axis. So I could write tip, and my numbers are going to be in dollars, or maybe I just put a dollar sign, whatever. Now, so that's the y-axis, so that means meal cost must be the x-axis, and that's also in dollars. That's a dollar sign, hard to tell. All right, so now that we have established which axis is which, now we got to take a look at our data and figure out what numbers are we going to plug in on these axes. So we'll take a look at, for meal cost, which is the x variable here. Take a look and see what's my lowest number. I have a 475 there. What's my highest number? A 2042. Now, if this is close enough to 0, I like to just start them at 0. Okay? Let's take a look at the tip. And also, the lowest number there is 0.50. That's pretty close to 0. So I'm just going to make the origin here be 0. Okay? So for meal costs, the next thing I need to do is figure out what is my range. How high do I need to go? So the highest value for meal costs is $20.42. So that means I need to go at least that high. I need to show that on the graph. But I want to make sure that my graph, my actual line that I'm making, is as large as possible with the numbers. I want to use as much of that graph as possible so I can really see what's going on. So basically, I have to go from 0 to 21. So I have 21 values to cover. And normally, if I was making my own graph and didn't have a grid provided for me, I could just make 21 marks and make them all worth 1 if I wanted to. But here we have marks given to us. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 11 marks to use. All right, so I can just divide that to see how much I need to make each mark worth. So I'll take 21 and divide it by 11, and I get 1.9. I'm not going to make each of these marks worth 1.9 because that's weird. I like to have good numbers to use, like 1 or 5 or 10, or even 2 is a good one. And what I can do is, since this is 1.9, I can just round that up just slightly to 2, and if I make each mark worth 2, I'm going to have a pretty good scale here, I think. So let's see. So I'll make the first mark worth 2, and then I'll go 4, and then I'll go 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. Can I fit all my numbers for the meal cost values? Yes. And am I going to be using most of that x-axis? Yes. All right. Okay, now I want to do the y-axis. So the y-axis, I'm going to start at 0 also. My highest value there is $3. So that means I have to go up to at least 3. All right, and I still have 11 marks on the y-axis as well. It is a box, so that comes out to be like 0.27 or something like that. Now, 0.3 isn't really a great value to use, but I don't want to round up all the way to 0.5. It's going to make my scale too big. It's going to make the graph too small. So I'm just going to round it up to 0.3. So the first mark is going to be 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, 1.2, 1.5, 1.8, 2.1, 2.4, 2.7, 3.0. That's where my highest point is. So am I covering all my numbers on the y-axis? Yes. Am I using a majority of the y-axis? Yes. So this should work. Okay. So now I just plot my points. Meal cost is $4.75. So $4.75. So between 4 and 6 down here, in between that, directly in between that would be 5. So $4.75 would be a little less than halfway between them. And there I'm going to go up for a 50-cent tip, so maybe somewhere around here. All right. And then I have $6.84 is 90 cents. So I'm going to go up to about where 7 would be in between 6 and 8. And I'm going to go up to 90 cents. All right. And then I have $12.52 is $1.50. So I'm going to go up to, let's see, 12 and 14. And between that would be 13. Maybe halfway in between 12 and 13 would be $1.50. So I'm going to go up to $1.50 there and put a mark. Okay, and then we have 2042 is $3. So that's going to be a little past 20. I'm going to put a mark at 3. And then we have 8.97 is $1, so almost 9. And I'm going to go up about where $1 would be, right about in there. Okay. So here are my dots. Now I'm using a colored marker, and so it's hard for me to actually show how I do this on a regular graph, but you guys would want to make sure you're using pencil if possible. And what I do is I just kind of look at where the data is. Okay, get an idea coming down here, try to make a little oval around where the data is. And when I think I have a really light, because I don't want it to distract and be in the way of the actual graph, have a big dark oval around it. I'm then going to trace a line very lightly through what I think is the middle, and this is showing up dark because I don't have tracing on here, and I'm doing it really light on the smartboard as if that's going to make some kind of difference, and it doesn't. But so that would normally, if I was using pencil on paper, be super, super light, not real easy to see. And I go, does that look like it goes through the middle of my numbers? And if the answer is yes, now I go back with a ruler and lay it along that line, and now I make a dark line through it so I can see it good, and there's my best fit line. All right, so now what I have to do is I have to find the slope of that line. So I'm just going to try to find 2 easy points to use. In order to find slope, we need to have a y2, and we're going to subtract y1 from it. And then on the denominator, we're going to have an x2 and subtract an x1, and that's going to tell us our slope. So if I just look at this, look for easy points like intersections that are easy to read where I don't have to estimate in between numbers or anything like that. If I look right here at this spot, that looks like a good, easy spot to read. And I'm going left to right when I'm determining what's x1 and y1, what's x2 and y2. So going left to right along this graph, which in this particular graph means bottom left to top right, I see this one here. I'm going to use that as my x1 and y1. So that looks like it's 6 for the x value and 0.6 for the y value. So x1 is 6 and y1 would be 0.6. All right, cool. Now I just need to find x2 and y2. All right. So I'm going to go farther along this line, more towards the top right, and look for another good intersecting point. I kind of like this one right here. It's right in between these two, but it is 2.1. So right in between those two would be 15. So I'm going to make x2 be 15. And I'm going to make y2 be 2.1. All right, so now I'm just going to plug these numbers into that formula. Y2 is 2.1 minus y1, which is 0.6. And on the bottom, I'm going to have 15 for x2 minus 6 for x1. So that's going to be 1.5 over 9. And if I just divide that, and that comes out to be 0.17. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah, it does. .17, yes. Okay. And there's my slope. So that's how you do the slope of a best fit line. Just picking two easy to read numbers off that line, always going left to right to determine what's x1 and what's y1. Okay, and what's x2 and y2. And then expected tip. If diner orders a meal costing $10.50, how much tip? So let's go to $10.50. So in here would be 11, and $10.50 would be about halfway there. Work up to the best fit line we made. Yeah, it looks like it's in between 1.2 and 1.5. Maybe it's 1.35 maybe. $1.35. Okay. Now I wanted to show you one other thing. And you guys might be starting to wonder, hey, why do we have different numbers? Why do we have different numbers? So-and-so in group 3, they had this slope, but we have this slope. Why is that? Think about it. I'm not going to answer it. Just think about it. All right? Why do we have different numbers? Okay, moving on, I wanted to show you number 3. So like I said, we want our graph to be as blown up as possible, easy to see. All right? So what we can do, here's a little trick, is we don't always have to make the origin be 0. We could put in a little break there, just kind of mark these off so I know that, hey, this is really a part of the graph we're showing. All right, now I'm not going to start at 0 this time because when I look at length and weight, they don't really start close to 0. They're higher numbers. What's another problem we might have with this data? If you look at that data in the table, what's a problem we'll have in making a graph? Any ideas? If you look at that data, think about what you need to put on your graph. Is there a problem there? Who should I call on? Let's see. No ideas? What's wrong with the data? The length is 60. Say what? Oh, you were just going to say that? That's all? 60 what? Oh. 60 what? What are the units? How do you know? You don't know. That's the problem with the data. They didn't provide units. We always want to know units. Now, talking about these sand sharks, if we're first of all trying to determine the axes, what would you say? What makes more sense? The length depends upon the weight, or the weight depends upon the length? Length depends upon the weight, or weight depends upon the length? What makes more sense? Take a guess, somebody. Geez, you're so scared. Huh? Weight depends upon the length? Very good. I think I agree with that, yeah. Weight depends upon the length. So I'd put weight then as the dependent variable on the y-axis and put length down here. So they didn't put units, so I'm just going to guess that they meant centimeters for length. What would make sense for weight? Not pounds, that would be huge. 105 grams. I don't even know if that works, but let's just put it down here so we're not waiting forever. All right, so I'm not starting at 0 on my length graph. I'm going to start, since it's higher up, I might start at 60 on the first mark. Okay? And so if I got to go from 60, the lowest number, to the highest number, 72, that's 12 spots I need to cover. And then I can count all these marks I have. So there's 60. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 marks I have. Okay, so I've got 12 divided by 19. I need to make each mark worth at least 0.63. I don't like that. 0.63. We can't make them worth 0.63. Let's round up to something. Oh, let's see, 0.7, 0.75 isn't bad. That's 3/4. What if you have two 2.75s? How much is that? Oh, it does. You're right. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. So that's a good, I mean, I already put centimeters, but there's our indicator that they're talking about inches. Good job. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make each mark worth 0.75. So that means the first mark after this would be 60.75, and then the next mark would be 61.5. That's going to be a lot of writing. It's going to be tough to put it in there. So instead of making each mark worth 0.75, I'm just going to double it and make every 2 marks 1.5. That way it's a little clearer to write in there. So if that's 60, go 2 marks and put 61.5. This is even going to be hard to do. And then 2 marks, I'm going to make that 63. And then 2 marks, I'm going to make it 64.5. 2 marks, I'm going to make it 66. And so on. All right? But the reason I'm showing you this graph, and I'm not going to go through all of it because I just showed you how to do the best fit. I showed you how to do the slope of the best fit. Here, the only point I'm making is that you can put in these breaks to show that we're not starting at 0. Maybe I want to start the y-axis at 105 or maybe 100, but something closer to it. All right, does that make sense? And then I still want to figure out what kind of scale will I use here so that I use the majority of this y-axis. Okay? So in your groups, you guys are going to be going through those graphs. Make sure that you guys have them all. Every member of every group should have every graph. If you have all the graphs, then I want you talking about in each case, in each scenario, what does this slope for best fit line really mean? All right? And then you're going to share out. So good luck.